Yay.
We are back, and you're listening to The Chloe Show. I'm your host, Chloe Taylor Brown, and we have a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about agreements and what that means and how vital they are with Glenn Barker. And he is a wonderful resource and wealth of knowledge when it comes to manpower. As a matter of fact, he's the executive director for the Mankind Project Chicago, and we have been speaking to him for a few weeks now as our guest host. So we want to bring Glenn on right now. Help me to welcome Glenn Barker to the Chloe Show.
Hello, Chloe, and hello, listeners. And thank you for another opportunity to share some wisdom and grow some better men.
You are welcome. So, Glenn, how are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. I'm very excited about the topics that we've been able to cover and the service that I believe we're providing to make this a better world we're in. So, grateful. So I'm showing up here as grateful and enjoy, meaning I got what I want.
I love that I'm a part of helping you to get what you want. That's so cool. So, I have from a coaching perspective about agreements. Agreements that we're going to determine our ideal and to accomplish what we set out to accomplish. We're agreeing that the client would do a certain thing. Also, in marriage, you have agreements with your children. In almost all walks of life, you have to make agreements. And I am really, really excited to hear your perspective and how this works with distinguishing between boy and man.
Very good, and that's what this title of this segment is. It's the courage to be a man, and these are courage pieces. As men and as humans, we can give ourselves a pass. We don't hold ourselves to our own agreements with ourselves, and that's the distinctions, the way you put it, between the boy who makes excuses in life and the man who takes responsibility. I'll put it this way, this is not instinct. This is an exercise to learn how to stand up as a man. And I hold the judgment that men need other men in their lives. Men that know about these things and know how to deliver this as a blessing. We call it the gift of accountability, not the shaming of accountability. Done in the right way, these are gifts to the man when they can be mirrored back to him by other men. So, we do men's groups and men's weekends, and I hold that this is the cleanest way that a man can grow himself, through being mirrored back and explaining himself and what he wants and what he's trying to accomplish with other men that help him get there through things like integrity. Those are the agreements that we keep with ourselves. And accountability are agreements we keep with the outside world.
Well, we talked about integrity last week, I believe, and accountability the first week that we started this. And talk about the three of these interconnecting together, intertwining, working together, being accountable, having integrity, and the agreements that a man would make. Would this man make the agreements with himself? Because I know when I'm talking to myself and coaching myself and saying what I want, I have to make an agreement with myself first. And is this what you do with your group as well, or is it something different?
You're right. There are these three pieces are inseparable from each other. So let's start with that. The integrity piece is, and that's the number one piece, and you have it right, Chloe, is the agreements we make with ourselves. If we're making agreements with ourselves, let's put a practical example. New Year's resolution, I'm going to start running a mile a day. I'll say agreements that make you stretch, and then there's agreements that are leaps. So is this a stretch for you, or is this a leap? And I think we can set ourselves up for failure. We can set ourselves up to disappoint ourselves so we don't believe ourselves, which erodes our integrity. In other words, do we believe within our deepest selves that we can commit to this? So that's the number one thing. Making an agreement says, is this okay with me? truly okay? Or is it a stretch, I will be a little out of my comfort zone? Or is this a leap, meaning I'm agreeing to something I have no clue how I'm going to try to do that, and that's setting yourself up for failure. So this is a critical, slow-down piece exercise that we do with men around their link between their own integrity and their agreements. So being discerning about your agreements is the topic.
So are you saying that if a man makes an agreement, I would say that this would be for women perhaps too.
Absolutely.
If I were to make an agreement with myself that I'm going to write a book about engineering, which I don't really know that much about, then is that setting myself up for failure? I'm not really interested in writing that book, but maybe someone else wants me to, they challenge me, and I would agree that I'm going to do it. Am I out of integrity by agreeing to do something I don't want to do and know that it's going to be a stretch for me?
I think you're setting yourself up for that. I would say, in that case, I would ask you the question, Chloe, are you, this piece you want to do about a book about engineering, for you, is that a stretch, meaning that's something you just have to focus on and give time to, or would you say that's a leap, something that's, you're dumping in the deep end and you haven't learned to swim yet? And how does that feel to you on the inside?
Well, I think on the inside, and this is very fictitious, I'm making this up, but just the thought of it is a leap.
It's a great example. You would say it's a leap. And then I would say, then, Chloe, as your friend, mentor, have you already made agreements around doing this book with anybody yet? And your answer would be?
Well, no, I've been thinking about it, but now that I have all this anxiety in me and I'm making up excuses of why I can't do it, just with what I know for myself, that would be such a stretch. I mean, not even a stretch. That would be a leap. Because if it were a stretch, are you saying that I could possibly get through that because it's just stretching myself?
And maybe you need support for that, and you'd like to look at that because that would stretch you. It takes you a little out of your comfort zone, and that's important, that we're stretching ourselves. And with the men, we have support systems for that. And the man can ask for what kind of support looks like for him. A leap is something, when I hear something like that, I'll ask a good question. For you, is that a stretch or is that a leap? And give you a moment, check in, so that you stay in integrity. When your words and your feelings and your actions are all aligned. Your head says yes, or your heart says yes, but are you really okay with that? And you said, no. Right?
Right.
So if we're in a group together, and before you go out and tell the world, then set yourself up for possibly failure or making excuses rather than taking responsibility. So if you want to rethink that stretch, what else might be a stretch for you that would be more reasonable, Chloe?
Well, a stretch for me that would be more reasonable is that I would write another book, and the book would be around something that I really am excited about, that I've always wanted to do, and I could see who the people are that I could get some advice from, and I could actually see myself doing the research and compiling everything together. Now, that's a stretch because I believe that anytime you say you're going to write a book, it's a stretch.
Anything you have to apply discipline to for a prolonged period of time, and it has a date and an outcome, yeah. So how does that feel on the inside? Does that feel a little more congruent? You actually feel that that's more connected with how you're thinking, feeling, and could probably act? Does that feel a little more true to your inner self to have that kind of stuff? Well, then I would say, without going further, we're on the road to maintaining your integrity with your agreements.
Well, Glenn, let me ask you this. How far or how near with the work that you're doing with Mankind Project Chicago, is it near to coaching, counseling, or therapy, or a little bit of all?
We're therapeutic, but we're not doing therapy. You know, if a man needs therapy, he needs to go to a therapist. But what this really is it's a mentoring, a mirroring, a combination of disciplines. And that's what makes us unique. It's really about setting the men up to have great procedures for doing this developmental exercises. And being with men that are exercising with them, watching them. It's like having 3 coaches around. Every man say there's 5 men in a circle. There's 5 men that are watching 5 men work and helping each other as coaches and spotters and shadow watchers and mirrors for them to help ourselves feel good about the experiment, to feel good about trying, to feel good about getting counsel and feedback and trying again. And celebrating, like we said last time, celebrating our wins.
Do you feel that a lot of men are not making agreements because they are afraid of the stretch, and they may think it's a leap?
You can say this, yes. Some men will not make an agreement, and so they give themselves a pass, and that's another whole way this shows up. One is making agreements you can't keep, and then dealing with the impact and the consequences of the shame and I'm no good, I can't believe myself, no one believes me. That's the road that goes down. That keeps us in our boy. And then if that gets painful enough, then we don't make agreements at all. And there is an impact and consequence to this life by inaction as well as action. And we need to cover that by not doing something, because if you don't risk, you don't get hurt, right? But to not act also has an impact and a consequence. How do you grow? How do you hold to commitments? This is the part of the boy, again, that wants to avoid the conflict, doesn't want to commit, doesn't want to stretch, because that's a fear-based thing too. So they don't commit to much of anything. So now I'm safe? Well, yes, you're safe, and you're also trapped. And you're also playing small, and let me check in with your integrity. Are you okay with that? See how this works? Are you okay? Yeah. The safety is also a trap.
Safe, trap, playing small, and you said something else.
And this has an impact and a consequence to it on itself, and this is the part that keeps us as boys. When I feel that in the room or with a man, I ask him, is that what you want? To check in on his integrity. Is that how you want to show up? The fear piece
is, this is
right? You see how these things link now?
Yes.
We're not blasting men with shoulds and shame. We're saying, is that what you want? And if we're honest and we have a safe circle that allows the man to out himself, he's like, no, really, why? I'm scared. Thank you. Thank you. You're scared. All right. Now, let's talk about fear.
What are some of the biggest things they say that they are afraid of?
We should do an introduction to feelings. It's wonderful. We'll do a program about this. Fear means something's coming to get me. That's how we describe fear. Something's coming to get me. This goes back to childhood. I open my mouth and I get slapped, or I get put down, or I get laughed at, or I commit to something I don't feel I'm good enough. I mean, a lot of it just goes back to, I don't want to take that risk anymore. That's really what it is. And that keeps me safe, but that keeps me trapped. So that's the dilemma that men live in. And I dare to say women too. To not be able to make good agreements because you know how. To be led in this by men that understand this and help us stretch ourselves so we're not setting ourselves up to failure and not taking the easy road all the time. Men appreciate this. This is the clarity that says, is this not about making you comfortable? This is about making you reasonably uncomfortable so that we grow ourselves as men. And as we said before, a man has to bring himself to this work. We can't make a man get better.
You cannot make a man get better.
No. Like we spoke in the earlier programs, they would take the boys out at 14, and those young men didn't have a choice in the tribal cultures. You're coming, and you're going to be with the men. It was an intervention, and it just happened. These days, we don't do that. The man himself has to say, my life is not, I'm not showing up, my life is not what I want it to be. Now, are you willing to come to the men's developmental gym called Mankind Project, or a man's group, and start your work? How do you build your integrity? Well, agreements. Is this okay with you? In the outside world, your agreements, and we should go into this, I don't know how our time is, but how we make agreements to the outside world means also, this is accountability. Are we going to hold ourselves to the impact and consequences of our agreements? It's one thing to make an agreement. Will we hold ourselves to the impact and the consequence of either doing it or not doing it? That's grown men talk. That's not boy talk.
Grown men talk. I love that, grown men talk. Do you find that when, just in society, that a lot of groups of men, when they're getting together, are talking boy talk?
Oh, absolutely. This courage to hold a safe space for men has to at first be led by someone who understands that. And many times, your close friends and or even relatives. That's why we talk about fathers even being in the home. Sometimes it's too close. There's been too much shaming and too much conditioning going on to break out of that. That's why it's kind of good to have these other men that are all kind of there for the same reason. I want to open and grow, and I want to look at how I'm sabotaging myself, so I'm going to say things about me that I know the men will hold confidential and help me get my feet out of the mud.
This is very, very powerful, an agreement. Talk more about agreements and how this is so vital to the expansion of a man and men.
We ask the men to be very specific. Chloe, are we going to meet at 12 o'clock at this place? I will be there 10 minutes early, and I have an hour. I have to leave at 1, and are you okay with that? So to be very specific about your agreements. And I check in with me. I believe I'm in integrity. I can do that. I want that for myself, and I've made arrangements in my life to set that up to work. All that goes well. I'm in integrity, and I'm in accountability. I felt good about it. I did it. I did what I said I was going to do, and I honored the way I could do it, and I honored my commitment to you to do it. Perfect scenario. That's perfect
big
scenario.
One. I love that. Yes, I like that because you're not leaving anything out. There's no communication that's left out about what you're intending, the time that you have, what you're offering. It's full communication. It's a full circle of communication.
Within the person and with the person outside.
Right.
Wonderful.
So,
we call this clean.
Clean communication?
Yeah, this is clean. This is clean communication from the inside to the outside, back to the inside. This is the perfect scenario.
I love this, and I think that this is a really wonderful place for us to wrap up with clean communication. So what I'm going to say to have clean communication with you is that you agreed to be here today at 2, and you showed up at 2, and we went on at a certain time, and you were going to talk about agreements, and you've even given me more. You've given the listeners more. And now I know that there's a certain thing as clean communication. And just so that we will know, do you have an idea what we're going to discuss next week?
Absolutely. I'd like to go as an introduction to feelings, and I also have a wonderful story about what I call the relationship bucket.
Ah, relationship bucket.
Yeah.
We may have to have a little more time next week for the introduction of feelings, because I can think that would take, at least 15 minutes within itself. And then, let me write that down again. What about the bucket again?
It's a story I tell in men's circles, and I think it's appropriate here as well. It's called the relationship bucket. What are we putting in, and what are we taking out?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard this firsthand right here on the Chloe Show from Glenn Barker himself. We're going to be talking about the introduction to feelings and the relationship bucket. And I am really, really excited to hear about this myself. So thank you so very much for taking the time out of your Wednesdays to be with us to share from a man's perspective. We've been talking to Glenn Barker, and he's been sharing with us the courage to be a man. Thank you so much, Glenn.
You're so welcome, Chloe. And if let me put this out to the listeners: if you have men in your lives, and if your neighborhood or your church or an organization would like to start a men's group, foster a men's group, learn more about how to get one started, I'm glad to help. Please give me a call at area code 312-243-6743. That's Glenn Barker at 312-243-6743. MKPChicago.org is the web address, and I'm glad to help anybody that wants to move and grow this direction. Thank you.
Right, and you can also connect with Glenn at MKP Chicago at is it anything else Chicago on Twitter?
At gmail.com is the email address, and Glenn Barker and MKP Chicago is on Twitter, and Glenn Barker's on Facebook, and you look this direction, we'll connect.
Okay. Thank you so much, Glenn, and we will connect with you next week. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye for now. I really enjoy having these conversations with Glenn Barker. They are right on time, and we cannot have girl power without manpower. So we're going to be right back with our VIP guests right after this commercial break.